Mis amigos del mundo digital. My friends from the digital world.
两只老鼠，两只老鼠，一个没有耳朵，一个没有尾巴，好奇怪，好奇怪。两只老鼠，两只老鼠，一个没有耳朵，一个没有尾巴，好奇怪，好奇怪。
Hello, my dear friend from my digital world. Today I'm going to introduce to you a very good friend that I met on Tandem. We have already video chat for 4 times. We are chatting in a weekly basis. So I'm going to introduce to you my friend Grace Linxu. Please tell me if I pronounce well your name.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, my dear friend Carlos.
Well, the first topic to talk about is, can you please do a short personal introduction about you? Who is Grace Liu? Well, I know that you are from China, but what are you doing there in New York, the United States?
Okay. Great. Thank you, Carlos. It's really a pleasure. So I'm Chinese and a New Yorker because 12 years ago, I moved from Shanghai to New York. So why New York? It was my dream while I was still a little girl in China. I saw on a black and white TV a skyline over the park. At that time, I didn't know it's a Central Park, but I was thinking people living in that splendid city must be the happiest people in the world. So I want to live in that city. Of course, later on, I figured out it's New York City, it's a Central Park. Wow. It became a dream for me to able to work and live in New York City. So towards that dream, I've been studying overseas and working very hard for many years. And eventually, the last employer, Roche Vitamin, is a Swiss company. They gave me this opportunity to transfer from China to New York City, wow, working as an expat in the city. So I moved 2010 to New York and live in my dream city since then.
Oh, that's good. But your education, you grew up, you were born and grew up in China. So do you have any special memories, something interesting, something maybe, I don't know, unusual that happened to you in your primary or high school education in China? Or tell us something about the educational system in China.
Very good question. So education is my favorite topic because it's deep in the Chinese blood. You know, every Chinese family you meet overseas, they really invest heavily on the children's education. So in China, in my time, I was born in 1974. At that time, it's still allowed to have two kids in one family. So I have a younger brother, 2 years younger than me. Normally, the family would expect the son to take over the family tree and the tradition and having the best education. But in my family, my younger brother, he doesn't like to study. Wow. But for me, because I had the dream to live in New York City, and also in my generation, the parents give you a mentality that once I'm independent, I have to support my family. So I always thinking working in foreign companies or overseas could help myself and also help my family. So the education was a strong focus since I was a little kid. I always study extremely hard. A strong memory is before my final examination, the most important examination, 高考 for Chinese. I study every day in the morning from 5 o'clock until evening, sometimes falling asleep.
5 o'clock in the morning?
Studying.
5 o'clock?
Yeah, until studying midnight.
Wow.
So I had basically 6 hours of sleep every evening since
Wow.
I remember in the school. We have a class in the morning, in the afternoon, but also in the evening in the school. But in order to compete, able to go to good school, university, I have to study after I back from school after 9 o'clock in the evening. So it's really very, very hard studying over many, many years. And even during the Chinese New Year, I keep on studying. So all these hard work of study
Sure,
able
sure.
to make me be accepted by the university I want to go. So that's a very strong memory, only study all the years
All the time
without
studying. And what
a
about
break.
the teaching of the English language there in Chinese schools?
Good question. So it's very different with today. Back to my generation, we only started English education in middle school, which means I was already 14 years old. So we only have an English class once per week. And then for the middle school in the third year, 2 classes. So it wasn't a lot of English studying, but because I was so fascinated by English, particularly the literature, Virginia Woolf and all these amazing literature from American, from Europe. So I study English much harder than the other
Yeah.
students. So I was able to elected as an English class representative, which means the person who has the best English among a class size, which is
Wow.
typical more than 60 students.
Wow.
So English has been always my passion. And
Wow.
also during the long hours studying, I study English just to relax. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
hard.
it's a hobby. Yeah, yeah. You relax studying English. Now let's talk about a little bit about your job, your profession. Your profession. When did your vocation for your career arise?
Vacation?
Your vocation, your job. How you discover the stuff that you are doing right now as a job, as a
Ah,
profession?
very good question. So, of course, I've been working for 26 years. So, in a snapshot, I was employed by Nestle, the Swiss company, as a management trainee during the time I'm graduating from university. So, I have to compete with thousands of applicants. I was very lucky elected to be one of the 5 management trainee. So I started my career in foreign companies. At that time, the global company, foreign companies in China was seen as the best paid and more glamorous job.
Yeah.
After working Nestle for 5 years, I went to UK to study my first master. And then later I was working for Pepsi. But eventually, my passion is about nutrition, health, well-being. So I was able to hired by a Danish biotech company as a Chinese representative in China back to 2002. Well, all the Chinese remember 2003, we have the SARS broke out in China. And so I was working for this biotech company over years to establish their research center, manufacturing, sales office. And then I was hired through that by the Swiss company Roche, working in Switzerland for 2 years. And after that, they transferred me back to China to be their human health China head, basically. And then the company also, out of my request and also a need to transfer me from China to New York. So that's my basically professional career for 25 years.
Oh, wow, that's good. Let's talk a little bit about languages. How many languages do you speak? Are you studying? Are you interested in?
So I really think a language give you a different soul to understand the culture. Since I moved to New York, and me, Abril, hay muchos mexicanos, dominicanos
Sure.
y Latinos.
Are they
Me
called
encanta
Hispanic too?
español.
Are they called
Yeah,
Hispanic or
Latino.
Latinos,
We
Hispanic?
call it the Latinos. So there are so many Latinos in the New York Upper West Side where I live. And I was traveling to Guatemala, to Peru. I really love the Latin culture. So I find out it was pretty silly to not able to speak the local language. So I started my first language learning in Guatemala. And since then, I continue to learn Spanish until now because I really feel the Spanish gives me completely different cultural sensation and also understanding. And there's I think 31 countries or 21 countries people speak Spanish.
Yeah.
I'm a world traveler, so it's my passion to learn the language, to learn the culture, to learn the history, able to speak with local people. I spent 3 weeks in Cuba. Solamente habla español con la gente
Yeah.
local, Uganda.
Muy-
So that's my passion about the learning language, able to speak local people who doesn't speak English, of course Chinese, but able to connect.
So, with your experiences in languages in your job, you have been you have had the chance to visit different countries. Could you tell us something about your travels in the world, countries that you have
Yes.
visited?
So my passion is really about traveling. So far, I've been traveled to 60 countries.
60.
And 60, yeah, 60. But
Oh.
normally, my way traveling is not a tourist. I really like to live with local people, local family, to speak a local language.
So,
I would
do you have
say-
plans to visit Chile?
Oh, sure. That's definitely my to visit top list. So I would just spend a month also or 2 months in the local community to speak a local language, explore local. I call it explorer rather than traveling. So I've been to a few Latin Central American countries, Colombia, Peru, Guatemala, Argentina, and Central America. So I really love it. I feel my soul is very connected with Latinos. So my to visit list is Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, Costa Rica, of course.
I had a news for you. I won a lottery. In about next week, I'm going to travel to China. Please, I would like to hear your recommendation, the places or cities that I must see in my travel to China.
Congratulations. So the must-see is I would like you to go to visit my family. They have such amazing hospitality to foreigner, to my friends. It's just the Chinese nature. They treat visitor much with a lot of honor, a lot of hospitality. So my parents, they live in the North City, a second-tier city in summer, and then in winter they live in the biggest island in China in the south called Hainan Island, which is 3 times than Hawaii, but it's the same altitude, the same tropical weather as Hawaii. So if you visit, of course, a lot of people go to Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an. You could do that, but besides that, in order to fully understand the Chinese culture, immerse yourself, I recommend you to go to visit my family. I have a huge family, and my family typically they living in the same compounds, different apartments. So you're able to see larger families. Sometimes they have breakfast, 20 of them together, sometimes 10 of them, sometimes a few of them. But they live nearby, supporting each other. So this is a very traditional Chinese family, not like the modern family in Shanghai, which are very independent with their neighbors. So go to North China, like Dalian, or East China, Qingdao, where my family originally from, or go to the Hainan Island in South Island. You have the best tropical fruits, weather, and also Chinese massage.
That sounds quite interesting. Well, now I think a question: do you have any topic, or hobby, or activity that you would like to share? But I'm interested
Yeah.
in to know a little bit about Buddhism. You told me that you are
Okay.
Buddhism practicing. Well, tell me something about that. Your experiences.
Okay. So this is an amazing question. I'm a Buddhist, so I practice Buddhism in my daily practice. I don't see Buddhism as a religion, but more like a lifestyle and a belief. So in my generation, because we are the new boomer, and which religion was not that common among most of the Chinese, because in history, Buddhism, Taoism was dominating, but since the new generation came to take over the economic and also political scene, it wasn't in the mainstream. But I feel very close to Buddhism also because I practice yoga and meditation every morning. So it just feel perfect match for myself. And the Buddhism, I originally, of course, is from India, or more correctly to say is the border with India in Nepal. And then they've been broadcasted and promoted and most well-known through China. There are basically different lineage for Buddhism. There's Buddhism in North and South China, Zen to Japan, and also the Buddhism to Southeast Asia. But for me, I don't distinguish the lineage. I just follow the proper things to do. So the first very important thing for Buddhism is no killing. So you don't kill things which is unnecessary. You don't have to be a vegetarian to be a Buddhist, but it's highly likely that the people follow Buddhism belief in the daily basis tend to be vegetarian, as I am. And secondly, it's very important to work on your own ego. Ideally, get rid of your ego, which is almost impossible for me, at least. So I'm still working on try to be less egocentric. And the third, very important, is helping others. No matter it's your family members need your help, or your friends, your neighbors, or anybody which you could give a hand. So helping others is very important. I'm just listing a few as a Buddhist that I've been practicing in daily basis. I also go to Vipassana silence retreat 10 days every year, and also volunteer. So I'm very good at cooking. So I cook for people in the Vipassana center, sometimes 150 people. I really love it.
Oh, well, what interesting talking to you on all the information you gave us. So I think my audience is going to be surprised with all your information. And at the end, I usually ask the people, if you know, do you dare to sing a song, a typical song for your country, for your region, your country? Perhaps you remember a childhood song or whatever.
I do.
Yeah, do you dare to sing a song? Okay.
Yes, sure. So in Chinese, these are the songs that I think I was a kid. 两只老鼠，两只老鼠，一个没有耳朵，一个没有尾巴，好奇怪，好奇怪。So that's two mouses, two mice, one without an ear, one without a tail. How bizarre, how bizarre. So yeah, I think it's international song, right? The rhythm. About.
Thank you so much. I've been enjoying talking, chatting with you, Grace. Thank you so much for your time.
Same here. Encantado. Gracias, Carlos.
Hasta la vista.
Hasta la otra vez. Ciao. 两只老鼠，两只老鼠，一个没有耳朵，一个没有尾巴，好奇怪，好奇怪。
Mis amigos del mundo digital. My friends from the digital world. Si le gustó el video, dele un me gusta, compártalo en sus redes sociales y suscríbase a mi canal. De esta forma estará ayudando a Profesor Youtuber Retirado. Muchas gracias por su atención.